You ever walk into a store and the exact thing you want is right there on the shelf, waiting for you? Well, that's not luck. It's the result of a hidden engine that runs our entire global economy: supply chain forecasting. It is a high-stakes game of predicting the future. And, getting it right is the difference between massive profit and total disaster. So let's break down exactly how the pros do it.
So the biggest monster that supply chain managers have to fight is something called the Bullwhip Effect. Just imagine this: a tiny, almost unnoticeable change in what customers are buying. Maybe just a few more people decide to buy a certain brand of soda this week. Well, that tiny ripple gets amplified as it moves up the supply chain. The retailer overreacts a little. The distributor overreacts even more. And by the time that signal gets all the way to the manufacturer, that tiny ripple has become a tidal wave of bad information. And that leads to either completely empty shelves or warehouses that are literally drowning in stuff nobody wants.
So how did the giants, the Amazons and the Walmarts of the world, how did they dodge this kind of chaos? How do they seem to just magically know what millions of us are going to want, months before we even know we want it? Well, it's not magic, not at all. It's a science. And we're about to pull back the curtain on their playbook. Okay, so here's our game plan for this masterclass. First, we're going to look at the two big philosophies of forecasting. Then, we'll get our hands dirty with the actual quantitative tools they use. After that, we'll figure out how they even know if they're doing a good job. We'll see how AI is changing absolutely everything. And finally, we'll take a look at what the future of prediction even holds.
All right, first up, the two mindsets. You see, every single forecast starts with a huge choice. Do you rely on human judgment, or do you trust the cold, hard data? It really is the classic battle between art and science.
And this really breaks down that core conflict. On one side, you've got the art of forecasting. That's the qualitative approach. Just think about Apple getting ready to launch the very first iPhone. I mean, there was zero historical data for that. They had to rely on panels of experts, market research. It was pure human judgment. But then on the other side, you have the science, the quantitative method. Think about a company like Coca-Cola predicting sales for their classic drink. They have more than a century of data they can feed into their mathematical models.
But, art doesn't mean you're just guessing. A really powerful qualitative tool is the Delphi method. The best way to picture it is like a silent, anonymous debate between a bunch of experts. So each expert writes down their forecast privately. Then a facilitator gathers them up, averages them out, and shares the anonymous results with the group. When the experts see where the group consensus is, they revise their own predictions. You just repeat this cycle a few times, and it is incredible how this process filters out all the individual biases and zeroes in on a really strong unified forecast.
All right, let's shift gears now from the art to the pure science. This is where we get into the mathematical engine room of forecasting. We're going to deconstruct the exact models that power the world's most sophisticated supply chains.
First up, we have the simple moving average. This is the real workhorse of forecasting. I mean, look at this bar chart. To predict April sales, we literally just take the sales from January, February, and March, add them up, and divide by 3. It's really that simple. But the real magic here is that it smooths out any random one-off spikes or dips in the data, giving us a much more stable and reliable picture of the real trend. But what if what happened last week is way more important than what happened 3 months ago? Well, that's where the weighted moving average comes in, and this visual makes it so clear. See how the bar for March is practically glowing? We're telling our model that March's sales data is way more important. We're giving it a 60% weight, because it's a much better clue about the future than what happened way back in January. This makes our forecast so much more responsive to what's happening right now.
Okay, next we're going to level up to exponential smoothing. It's basically a smarter, more elegant version of the weighted average. Instead of you having to manually pick all those weights, it uses just one single number, a smoothing constant called alpha. You should really think of alpha as a sensitivity dial on your forecasting machine. It gives you an incredible amount of control.
And that's the whole ballgame right there, this alpha constant. The best way to think of it is as a trust dial. So if you crank the alpha up high, you're telling the model, hey, I really trust this brand new sales data more than anything else. But if you turn it down low, you're saying, whoa, hold on, that latest data point might just be a fluke. Let's stick closer to our long-term plan. It gives the forecaster amazing control over how reactive the model is.
So far, everything we've looked at just uses past sales to predict future sales. But what if we could find the hidden connections between other things and our sales? Well, that's the magic of associative models like linear regression. This visual lets us ask a really powerful question. For every single dollar we spend on advertising, how many more products do we actually sell? The model crunches the numbers and then draws that line, the line of best fit, giving us a precise, predictive formula.
Okay, so we have all these awesome models, but how in the world do we know if they're any good? And that brings us to our next big section, measuring success. Because let's be honest, a forecast is completely useless if it isn't accurate.
In this table, you can see the two main ways to score your forecast. First, there's MAD, or mean absolute deviation. It's really straightforward. It just tells you, on average, how many units you are off by. But MSE, mean squared error, that's where things get really interesting. See, by squaring the error, it brutally punishes big mistakes. A manager for, say, a life-saving drug would care way more about MSE. Why? Because being off by 1,000 units is a potential catastrophe. But being off by 10 is, well, it's just a rounding error. MSE helps them focus on avoiding those absolute disasters.
All right, let's pivot now to the real cutting edge. We are moving from a world of looking in the rearview mirror to a world of proactive prediction, and it's all thanks to technology, AI, and a whole new spirit of collaboration.
This is where things start to sound a little bit like science fiction, but it's happening right now. Modern forecasting isn't just about sales history anymore, not even close. Today's AI models are being fed a constant fire hose of real-time data. Just picture a system that sees a TikTok video of a certain jacket go viral, cross-references that with satellite weather data showing a cold front moving in, and then automatically increases the production forecast for that jacket. All of that happening instantly without a single human lifting a finger. That's the kind of power we're talking about.
But even the smartest AI in the world can't solve this problem by itself. The ultimate weapon against that bullwhip effect is radical collaboration. It's a strategy called CPFR. So instead of each company working in its own little silo, making its own secret forecast, they all agree to share their data on one single unified dashboard. The retailer, the manufacturer, the supplier, they all see the exact same reality at the exact same time. This kind of total transparency is really the only way to truly tame the bullwhip for good.
So, what does this all mean for the future of forecasting? I mean, we have these incredible tools, but we also live in an increasingly unpredictable world. And that brings us to our final verdict: finding the right balance between the machine and the human mind.
The biggest takeaway for the modern era is this. The static annual forecast is basically a relic of the past. Making one plan in January and trying to stick to it all year long, that's like trying to navigate a winding road while looking at a map you printed out a year ago. It's completely useless. Today's world demands what we call rolling forecasts. Think of it like a GPS that is constantly updating, letting companies pivot and change course in real time.
And this brings us to the final and maybe the most important insight of all. For all of its incredible power, AI has one fundamental flaw. It can only learn from the past. It has no idea that you're about to launch a massive Super Bowl ad or that your main competitor just went bankrupt. That forward-looking, strategic context, well, that still requires a human being.
So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. As the science of forecasting gets closer and closer to being perfect, what happens to the art? In a world of nearly flawless data and automation, what is the new role of human intuition? It's a really fascinating puzzle to think about. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive.